Well, I would argue, I certainly understand the point. I would argue that we're doing even better for homeowners by not only avoiding the cap, which I think would be ultimately counterproductive, but by not having property tax increases. Now, I understand what you say in terms of predictability. What are we talking about 5 or 10 years ahead? But what I said since I came in the door is we're going to avoid property tax increases. I think the number one concern homeowners would have is no new increases. We understand there are real challenges around the assessed value and other considerations, but I think job one is to avoid a property tax increase. We have done that by making a series of decisions that both are fiscally disciplined, like our labor contracts, like the healthcare savings that we're achieving, which are unprecedented, but also by laying in the reserves. So God forbid we do have a downturn, and we know, again, it's not if but when, that we can sustain a core level of services and be able to protect, in particular, public safety, while not resorting to a property tax increase. So that is why I fully understand anyone on this panel saying, well, it looks like you have substantial available reserves. We argue those are necessary reserves because they will sadly be eaten up very quickly when the day comes that there's a downturn. Some of them are being eaten up right now because these new costs we talked about before. But I am adamant about guarding against any further property tax increases. And I don't want to do that via a fixed rule. I want to do that by smart budgeting and using our resources wisely.
Okay. It's definitely a discussion I would love to continue with you.
Please.
Because it certainly is the number one topic in my area and most of the outer boroughs. But I'll move on. I want to thank you and the administration for the work. Another topic that is big all throughout the state is and particularly in Staten Island, is the heroin and opioid epidemic.
Yes.
I know that you have been out there and working with us, but could you give us just an overview of what the city is budgeting this fiscal year to combat the heroin and opioid epidemic?
I'll see if Dean Fulan or Sharif Solomon have the exact dollar figure, but I'll give you the overview. We're very focused on this issue. It's a growing problem, and you may have seen the map in one of the papers the other day of what's happening around the country, even worse in many parts of the country, which is astounding, because I know Staten Island in particular, very hard hit, and many other parts of the 5 boroughs. We are making this a priority in terms of NYPD. We're making it a priority in terms of Department of Education and efforts to get young people to understand what these challenges are before they end up in a dangerous situation. We are doing a lot to work with grassroots organizations to reach parents and help them. We certainly have done a lot working with pharmacies to make the antidote drug available to avoid a fatal overdose. And there's a lot more that will be part of our package. It very much connects with our overall new initiative, Thrive NYC, which is a comprehensive citywide mental health initiative, but we consider the challenges of substance abuse to be absolutely interrelated to mental health challenges in many cases, so we have both of these strategies working together. But what we can say is, particularly as we've applied more and more focus and more energy, we are seeing an impact. And I think NYPD has been a crucial partner, but much more to do because we understand how pervasive this problem is.
No, and
we'll get the exact number.
We'll come back to you on those specific numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one more issue is you had mentioned that in the city budget you're providing $337 million in relief for New York City hospitals. Just to be a little local and parochial here, Staten Island is the only borough that does not have a New York City hospital, full service. When you are going through the budgeting for New York City hospitals, I would just request that we can have a conversation about money provided to the existing hospitals to make up for the loss that we don't have a hospital. Particularly after Sandy, we have found that there are certain hospitals that are in flood zones and some that are not. And if another disaster hits, the money is truly needed, not only in Staten Island, but in other areas in New York City.
Yes, thank you, Assemblyman. And as you know, we've tried to provide some additional support in terms of preparing for any kind of natural disaster, and that's been one of our focal points on Staten Island. Second, look, we're going to have to make some very tough choices going forward on health in the hospitals. We're going to have to make a series of reforms. To be optimistic in that process, we can also look at how we can address some of the longstanding equity issues. There's no question that Staten Island has not been given what it deserves, and we want to see how we can fix that issue, but it will unfortunately be against a backdrop of some major changes and reforms that will be very tough to achieve.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Assemblywoman Mayer and Assemblyman Barron. Senator?
Yes, next it would be Senator Liz Krueger, who is the ranking member on the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's so many of us with so many questions. I'm going to try to do a little lightning round, if it's okay with you.
All right, ready.
So Senator Young brought up the amount of Medicaid money New York City gets compared to the rest of the state. Do we get special rules for New York City, or is it just a ratio of the number of poor people drawing down Medicaid throughout the state and the New York City share?
Exactly.
I'd like to ask Dean Fulan to answer. Go ahead.
Exactly. That's the correct answer. We have no administrative or rate-setting powers over Medicaid.
Thank you. And there was also reference to the mandate relief available within this year's budget based on changes in Medicaid law over the last several years. Again, is New York City getting a disproportionate share of mandate relief for Medicaid compared to the rest of the state?
No.
Thank you. We were also asked about, or you raised in your testimony, that New York City would be obligated to contribute more per student in charter schools out of your education budget under the governor's proposal. Is that across the board for all localities, or only New York City would be obligated to put more of its education money into the charter formula?
Only New York City.
Only New York City. Thank you. So, yes, there's a CUNY system and a SUNY system, but is it the City of New York's position that we should have one higher education system for students who aren't in the City of New York and a different system with less funding for students who happen to be from the City of New York who go to higher education?
No.
Okay. And in fact, this proposal that the governor's making, what it does is shift a greater burden to the locality for CUNY students than for SUNY students.
That's correct.
And is it true that CUNY students are already lower income on average than SUNY students throughout the state?
Correct.
So would it be an equity model to require every county to contribute the same ratio to its SUNY system if this is required of the City of New York for CUNY?
As you know, we're asking that proposal not go forward, and as the mayor pointed out, we are taking the governor at his commitment, and we're working through that.
And in your testimony, you talked about increased costs for the City of New York on Medicaid because the governor doesn't, it lifts the state cap on localities having to pick up growth in costs. Is that being applied anywhere else in the state or just in the City of New York?
Just in the City of New York if it were to occur.
And then there was discussion about the fact that there's the $170 million per year from the old MAC bond deals, and the mayor discussed the fact that there was a court decision on this, and it was raised that why should the state continue to pay this money even though the courts apparently decided we're obligated to and we should. How is that number compared to what New York City no longer gets in AIM funding?
It is below what New York City normally gets. It was a commitment in 2005 for 30 years at $170 million a year. We used to receive over $300 million in AIM funding every year, which we are no longer getting.
And do you happen to remember what the state's argument was when it cut New York City's AIM or revenue sharing and left every other locality whole, if even still too low?
No, actually, I remember the city opposing it at that time as being the only city, the only municipality that would not be receiving municipal aid.
And did we put that money back this year?
You did not.
We did not. Thank you. There's also a proposal to change the formula of who pays for expanded or continued services for the homeless through TANF and Safety Net. Can you project, one, is that only for New York City or other localities? And two, what that will mean for New York City going forward?
Well, we actually need more detail on this and more detail on exactly what the homeless plan is, and we're looking forward to those details. The provision you're talking about is a may, and it allows that state actions in the city can be offset with other safety net payments that the state makes basically to single shelters. So there could be an offset. We have asked, and we're waiting for the details on that, so I can't give you specific numbers at this point.
But there's reason for us to be concerned until we have those details?
Yes.
Yes. There was discussion about the city not being under a 2% property tax cap and the rest of the state doing so. Ironically, perhaps just since we're sitting here in this conference room, I don't know where the Senate is today on schedule with its on session, but a bill is being voted on in the Senate today that would require a 2% cap in the New York City property tax. I, for the record, am voting no on that. Yes, Senator Lanza is the sponsor, but he's here with us, but I think the bill is going forward in his absence. Sometimes we get to debate his bill. But just for the record, if the Senate law were to go into effect, it would radically impact the budget projections for the city of New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, to have to be under 2% cap. And just finally, do you know how much money City of New York taxpayers send to Albany in comparison to what they get back from the state budget? And
The city contributes much more. We'll get you the exact figures, but the city contributes much more than we receive back.
there's a woman with a piece of paper behind you that she's trying to hand you.
We will get it for you in a moment.
You know,
I'm sorry, it wasn't a trick, but it looked like.
Senator, this lightning round is so fast, we're trying to keep up with it.
So, Mr. Mayor, you went through.
I didn't want to give you the wrong number.
No, I
was
didn't want you to
going
give
to
me
say 60%, it's 57%.
Clarify.
It's 57% that the taxpayers of New York City.
Could you say the whole sentence for everyone's edification?
So we're going to make sure I give it.
Okay.
We're experiencing technical difficulties, Senator.
I appreciate your ability to respond so quickly. I knew that we had so many questionnaires, I was trying to be fast here.
Very good. We'll get that clarified.
We're going to get
second, yeah.
clarified. Okay, I appreciate that. And there was one other section of the budget I believe you talked about in the context of housing. It would require 2 additional steps that
Right.
the City of New York would have to go through before it could approve city affordable housing projects.
Correct.
Is there any basis to make the argument that the City of New York hasn't been able to handle this effectively up until now?
No,
and
Senator.
needs 2 new levels of
No,
oversight?
This recalls the famous phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've been producing an immense amount of affordable housing using the bond cap authority. As I said, we had 1,200 more units that could have been produced had the additional authority been extended to us. I think everyone here wants to see affordable housing built as quickly as possible, and anything that can be done by government done efficiently. And we think adding these additional layers will only slow down the process at a point where thousands and thousands of people are waiting for housing that will allow them and their families to be able to make ends meet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if there's
So
not
I
enough,
will,
yes.
I will answer, it is what I thought, I apologize, approximately 60%. 60% of the revenues of the state are generated within New York City.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Assemblyman Weppern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming up here in the midst of cleanup, which I know is still taking place, and we're very, considering it was the second largest storm in the history of the city of New York, you know, I don't think you did so badly, although I know there's still some issues outstanding. On another subject, I chair the Assembly Task Force on People with Disabilities, and I was very proud to march with you and former Senator Tom Harkin last summer with your commitment to ADA and the 25th anniversary with Disability Pride Month, and your Commissioner, Victor Calise, does a great job, and I work very closely with his office, and I know you're very committed personally to ADA compliance and to making New York City accessible to all. Having said that, though, as you know, the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara came out with the results of a 2-year investigation and released that on December 21st, saying that 83% of New York City schools are not ADA compliant. And I know there was supposed to be some response from the city. I believe it was just last week, January 20th. Can you give us what the result of that is and what the fiscal cost might be to bring New York City schools to be ADA compliant?
Well, I'll start, and Dean Foulier may want to join in on the cost issue. First of all, the U.S. Attorney raised, obviously, an important issue. We all care deeply about maximizing accessibility in every way. We've tried to do that in a host of ways in the city, including, for example, ensuring that more of our taxis are accessible, and any number of other areas where we're trying to focus on making the city accessible for all. In terms of the city schools, since approximately 1992, as schools have been built or substantially rehabilitated, that has been done with accessibility standards. In terms of our ongoing efforts to upgrade older schools, we have $100 million in the current budget focused on additional accessibility efforts. 855 of our 1,582 school buildings. So again, 855 out of 1,582 school buildings are either fully or partially accessible. So that's a 54% level. And with only one exception, every one of our 32 districts has at least 8 accessible buildings. So considering we have a school system, many of which the buildings are built 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, we've managed to make real progress on accessibility. We're absolutely committed to it for the long haul, and we'll certainly work closely with the U.S. Attorney. Just by way of reference, walking distance from my home in Brooklyn is a school. It's certainly not typical, but it makes the point, a school that was built in 1875, PS 39. So we're dealing with schools of all different configurations, but it's an ongoing commitment of the city to continue to increase accessibility in our schools.
Okay, and the costs?
The cost of, again, ADA compliance per se, we're in the many billions of dollars, but I don't know if
Correct. We don't have a specific
we can
cost
try
at
and
this
give
time.
you a better reading on that, but certainly many, many billions of dollars.
Okay, I know you're personally committed, and I would like to work closely with your Office of People with Disability and Commissioner Calise on anything we can do at the state level to make sure that that accessibility occurs. In answer to Senator Kruger's question, my own personal recollection is that AIM was eliminated for the first time for New York City in Governor Patterson's last year, which was my first year up here in 2010, and it was supposed to be only for 1 year only and restored the following year. But when Governor Cuomo came in 2011, he stated that there was no cut because it was already zero from last year. So I think they kind of forgot about what we thought was a commitment between the state in providing AIM the following year. So, you know, I continue to argue that New York City should still continue to get that AIM, and we shouldn't give up on it. That our understanding as legislators was only going to be a 1-year time cut, and it would be restored the following year.
Well, we agree with your interpretation, and it's certainly never something we're going to give up on. I think your recollection of history is exactly right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you, but Mr. Mayor, one of the problems we have is we're going to have elections and people are being moved out of the schools. And Manhattan, the northern end, is hills. So what looks like 3 blocks apart can have to actually be a 100-foot drop and walking 10 blocks and then back. And we've had a lot of problems getting the school secure, the reason why we don't have the voting there. I'd appreciate it if you could look into that so that we don't have a problem where people will be going 10 blocks and 20 blocks when they didn't have to because a railing is loose on the entrance. which could be fixed for $10.
I couldn't agree more. We will follow up with the Board of Elections, and obviously we're deeply concerned about people being able to vote and not finding any hindrance to vote. So I appreciate you raising this, and we'll follow up right away.
Yeah, because I thought they had problems in Brooklyn, too, with the same thing, losing the schools. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Senator Tony Avella.
Thank you, Madam. It's not on? That's what I did. Yeah, good.
Use another one, Tony, grab it.
Now it's on. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I think we're still in the morning.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to the property tax cap, the 2% cap that the rest of New York State has. You made a comment earlier in reference to a question from one of the Assembly members about this, that the city hasn't raised its tax rate in a number of years. But I can assure you, everybody watching your comments on TV is probably having the same reaction that I did, is that everybody's assessment goes up every year. And that is a tremendous burden on many homeowners, many seniors, disabled individuals who we want to keep in their homes. And I know at the same time you've been asking for the state to restore the Medicaid cuts. So I and the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, will make this recommendation to you and to the governor, that if you would institute the property tax cap, including assessments in New York City, then we would urge the governor and the legislature to restore the Medicaid funding. Your thoughts?
With real respect, Senator, I think that would be a very dangerous path for New York City. We have to be clear about the fact that, again, we have only ourselves to depend on in a moment of difficulty. And I do understand fully how many of my constituents are facing a burden which is related to, obviously, strangely enough, the success of New York City, the growth and strength of New York City. Our property values have gone up, and with that have gone up the assessments, and that has created a challenge and a burden. But I have to disagree, first of all, that I think, again, as a homeowner myself, there's a big difference between growth of an assessment based on value versus a property tax increase. A property tax increase is another form of negative for a homeowner, another hit on a homeowner, and we're working very, very conscientiously to avoid any scenario where a property tax increase would be necessary. Anything that would artificially limit our ability to put together resources would undermine all of our efforts, whether it be at public safety, affordable housing, education, et cetera, which are necessary for the city's future. And I would argue, again, with real respect, that trade-off is an unfair trade-off on its face, because the state has an obligation for these Medicaid, to cover these Medicaid expenses, and we're certainly going to remind people the state has that obligation and should consistently hold to that obligation. Anything, look, when this proposal first came out, and again, I want to emphasize, Governor quickly said it would not cost the city a penny, and I appreciate that deeply. But when it came out, what was so interesting was it was criticized by many members of the Senate and Assembly. It was criticized by CUNY students. It was criticized by people in the healthcare field. It was criticized by the Citizens Budget Commission and the Manhattan Institute. You don't usually see that particular coalition, but everyone had the same message. That would be the state supplanting its obligations and putting them on the city of New York. And the city of New York, in the end, again, we do not have a safety net. We have to take care of our own no matter what happens, levels of government above us, no matter what happens in the global economy. We have to take care of our own people. So I would not agree that that's a fair deal for New York City.
Well, with all due respect, I'm going to disagree, and I think Senator Young sort of outlined the situation by which the cap was imposed on other municipalities upstate. In return, the state assumed the Medicaid funding. So I think if we should apply the same logic to New York City. And Mr. Mayor, you know I represent a middle-class district, and if we don't help the middle class of this city, we're going to have an exodus like we had years ago. And as property values go up, even though the tax rate is not going up, their assessments are going up dramatically. I heard from a couple of people who got their tax bill just the other day, and they're talking $800 and $900 for a one-family home. For a lot of seniors, they cannot afford that. And if you had the 2% cap, as the rest of the state does, you'd be eligible for a lot of the state relief programs for homeowners. And I would just add, and I'll finish with this because we can obviously follow this up later, but I believe at the end of your statement, you said we're all New Yorkers. And I think it's unfair that New York City homeowners, property owners, don't benefit from the same property tax cap that everybody else in the state has.
Senator, you yourself pay city income tax, and you know that that is not the norm in the rest of the state. So I would urge you to recognize the fact that we have a set of challenges in our city that are different, a set of needs that are different. You know that we cover a lot of things in the city ourselves that are very costly and very challenging. And that, in fact, the notion, I just can't agree with you on any notion of an exodus of a middle class when, in fact, we're seeing the opposite phenomenon. The city's gentrifying. And that comes with some good elements and some really problematic elements. Property values are increasing intensely. There's no flight of the middle class in New York City. We're dealing with, in fact, the reverse phenomenon, trying to figure out how best to navigate it. But I'll tell you one thing. What would start to threaten the existence of the middle class in New York City is if we did not invest in public safety, if we did not invest in a better education system. Everyone knows we have sustained public safety gains, but that will only continue if we make the right investments, protecting both our communities and our officers. Everyone knows our school system is still not where it needs to be for the 21st century economy. We must make those investments. Our infrastructure, I'm sure you would agree, is far beyond where it needs to be for a major global economic capital. We're far, far behind some of our competitors that have made massive infrastructure investments because their federal governments, their national governments believe in that as a priority. Ours doesn't. So we end up having to do it. So I just have to remind you that if we cannot we don't have the resources to protect the quality of life in our city, the safety of our city, the infrastructure of our city, that's what will actually threaten the middle class.
Well, Mr. Mayor, again, I'm not going to debate you on this. I would disagree. All those things you mentioned, of course we want to do that. But as you well know, balancing the budget is taking issues and rectifying what are the needs. And I would just think that, and again, I disagree with you because I hear from people in my district every day that they're going to leave the city of New York because of the taxes, and the property tax is one of them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Senator.
We've been joined by Assemblyman Walter.
Assemblyman Brennan.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
You identified as a concern the proposal by the governor that the city be required to pick up 30% of the CUNY Senior College budget. And you indicated that you had learned that the governor was clarifying this proposal to assure that reforms and efficiencies would achieve those savings, and therefore there wouldn't be impose this burden on the city government. Can you imagine how reforms and efficiencies could cover 30% of the budget of the city university?
Let me separate 2 points within this, if I may. The governor put forward the proposal, and then the governor clarified the proposal. So obviously, I would urge the legislature to get clarity from the governor on how he intends to proceed. In the terms of the question of looking for reforms and efficiencies, we think that's a smart thing to do in government in general. We look forward to sitting down, hopefully as early as next week, city and state officials to talk about these 2 areas, Medicaid and CUNY, and see if there are some available options. But that process has not begun, so I can't tell you at this moment what it will yield on what kind of timeline. We take the governor at his word on the statement that for this budget, it will not cost the city a penny, and that's what I think we should all hold to and hold him to. But those conversations on the details have not yet begun.